In tonight's Dateline Defense, prisoner abuse, Iran's Revolutionary Guard, and state-sponsored bank hackers. We start in London, where two former inmates at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, criticized the Oscar-nominated film Zero Dark 30. The men, one from Iraq, the other from Libya, says it legitimizes abuse. For more, we turn to our guest tonight on Capitol Insider, Cedric Leighton, a military intelligence officer, retired U.S. Air Force colonel, and president of Cedric Leighton Associates. Cedric, let's start with that claim. Does this film condone brutal interrogation tactics?
Morris, I don't think it does. The basic film is a story, of course, about the bin Laden mission that resulted in his killing. And when you look at the scenes that deal specifically with the interrogation techniques, they don't really glorify it, but what they do is they try to tell the story, and that is in essence what led in part to bin Laden's demise and, of course, the successful mission by the SEALs.
Will Zero Dark 30, do you think, provoke a reaction similar to Innocence of Muslims? That's the anti-Islam video that provoked violent protests in September.
It could. You never know with the Arab world exactly which films will provoke them and which ones won't, but certainly Zero Dark 30 is a professional Hollywood production, much more so than the other film, and that could potentially result in some danger to U.S. facilities and U.S. personnel in the Middle East.
Moving on now into Syria. Rebel forces have completed the first major prisoner swap of their country's civil war. The regime released 2,000 prisoners, and then rebels released 48. Is this progress or simply a footnote?
I'm afraid it's just a footnote. Of course, it's good for the individuals involved and especially for the over 2,000 rebels that were released. But it is just a small note in the overarching struggle between the Assad regime, the Free Syrian Army, and the other rebel groups that are in Syria right now.
Rebels say their captives had ties to Iran's powerful Revolutionary Guard. Tehran denies the claim. Where do U.S. officials fall on this?
U.S. officials, at least privately, will say that the captured individuals are members of the Revolutionary Guard. And because of their connection, and you look at the types of experiences, their ID cards, all of those things that the rebels captured that indicate that there was some connection there, leads me to believe as well that they were, in fact, at least most of them were, in fact, Revolutionary Guard members.
This whole Arab Spring that's turned into an Islamist winter. We've got Egypt now suffering economic issues, never mind what they're going through politically, so Egypt's in turmoil. Once their denomination and value of their currency is down, then it's really going to be a problem. Getting back to the Assad regime now in Syria, is the devil we know better than the devil we don't know?
In the case of the Assad regime, I would say the devil that we know is a terrible devil and needs to be eliminated. Of course, you never know what's going to come next, and there's a great risk. I think what will happen in Syria is that it will devolve into a multifaceted civil war that will result in many factions fighting each other. And it's going to be a very brutal winter for the Syrian people, and it's also going to be a very brutal time for the rebel forces and for the government forces. But I think that the current regime, because of its alliance with Iran, is very dangerous to U.S. interests. The problem is what comes next. And I think U.S. policy has failed to influence that outcome to the degree that it could have if we had started working with them earlier, say in March of 2011.
Are the alternatives all anti-Western?
No, they're not, and that's part of the problem because we fail to really engage with the pro-Western elements in Syria and give them the strength that they needed in order to progress in their fight against Assad. Unfortunately, what you have now is that those that are engaged in Syria as so-called freedom fighters are predominantly folks with ties to Al-Qaeda or Al-Qaeda-like organizations, and that will mean, in all likelihood, that many of them will gain the upper hand as the struggle for Syria's future continues.
Let's talk money now. Meanwhile, U.S. security officials say recent hits on dozens of online banking sites might be the work of hackers in Iran. The banks include Citigroup, Wells Fargo, Capital One, HSBC, PNC, Bank of America. I got an email from my bank last week. I know viewers probably heard from their banks as well. Why do they think this trail leads back to Iran, and what are the hackers doing?
Well, several reasons, Morris, for people to think that it leads back to Iran. First of all, you had the Stuxnet and Flame viruses that affected the Iranian computer networks that were associated with the Iranian nuclear weapons program. Then you had other attacks against the oil terminals in southern Iran, and also several other elements in the Iranian port city of Bushehr were affected by viruses as well. So the Iranians responded in a way that is probably akin to their doctrine of asymmetric warfare, because what they did was they established a cyber army. They also are it's pretty certain that they're behind the attack against Saudi Aramco, the Arabian American oil company, which is Saudi Arabia's biggest company and the biggest oil producer in the world. That resulted in the destruction of 30,000 computers that were attached to the Aramco network. Pretty clear evidence that there is something going on, and that in all likelihood, because of the sophistication of the attacks against Aramco and now the sophistication of the attacks against the U.S. banking sector, those are the kinds of things that become really important from a the way in which we look at it from a cyber attack standpoint. So it is logical to assume that the Iranians are behind this because of the sophistication of the techniques and also the manner in which those techniques were carried out.
Cedric, before we leave, on the surface this appears to just be denial of service attacks, keeping me from accessing my online account. But is it going to be more than that? Are they going to try to just totally disrupt the banking system?
I think that this is the first stage. What they're doing is they're in essence doing a reconnaissance mission. They're determining what the banking networks look like, what the depositors do with their money, how they work the various aspects, various transactions that banks allow you to do. And because of that, they're trying to determine what kinds of things we do with our networks, how our networks are set up, and what the vulnerabilities of those networks are. Given all of that, this could very well lead to a much further and much more serious attack on the banking sector.
Well, they're striking back. They blame us for screwing up their economy. They're trying to get back at it. It's as simple as that. And you're going to be busy with this. What's your website, Cedric?
Well, my website is www.cedricleighton.com, and I can also be followed on Twitter at Cedric Leighton.
Colonel Cedric Leighton, our guest tonight on Capital Insider. Thanks for being with us, Cedric.
My pleasure, Morris. Thanks for having me.